Hey, storyteller. Have you ever been just minding your own business, writing away, and suddenly your word processing program flags a sentence as passive voice, but it doesn't tell you how to fix it? Or maybe your critique partner or a member of your writers group, or even your editor lets you know that you've been using too much passive voice in a scene? You might be thinking, okay, so what's wrong with that? I mean, what even is passive voice, and why is it bad for my story? More importantly, how do I fix it? We'll dive into all that, including how to recognize passive voice in your own work. But it boils down to this: passive voice makes your characters and your entire story feel, well, passive, which translates to boring in the mind of your reader, the kiss of death for your story. Welcome to this week's writer coaching session. I'm Bridget from B Squared Writer Coaching, an author, editor, and your story coach, here to help you make your story powerful, polished, and publishable so you can move readers and help them experience your character's journey with maximum emotional impact. First, I have a gift for you just for visiting my channel, the Passive Voice Cheat Sheet. It's a quick reference guide to help you recognize passive voice in your own work and correct it, with easy to answer questions and several red flags to look out for. Just click the link in the description or visit b2writercoaching.com/passive. That's the letter B, the number 2, writercoaching.com/passive to download your passive voice cheat sheet. Be sure to watch this video all the way through to the end to get this week's power up, a super practical action step you can use right now in the scene you're working on. This video will be a little different than many on my channel since we're going to go to my computer in order to make the content easier to follow. We will discuss what passive voice is, how to recognize it in your story, why you should avoid it, and most important of all, how to correct it. So let's dive in. Okay, here we are at my computer, ready to dive in. The thing to remember about passive voice is this should be avoided by all storytellers. Here's a hint. That sentence is an example of passive voice. Here's another one. A little goofier, but maybe a little bit more fun. The ball was spun by Rebecca. And yes, that is passive voice. There are 3 parts of a sentence we need to focus on when trying to recognize whether it is passive voice or not. The first is the subject of the sentence. The subject is who or what the sentence is about or focused on. You can kind of think of it like the main character of the sentence. In this case, the ball is the subject of the sentence. It's focused on the ball. If you look at the picture, you might think Rebecca should be the subject because, well, we sort of gravitate toward people as the subject of a sentence. But in this case, that is not happening. The ball is being spun, so the ball is the subject. The next part of the sentence we need to be aware of is the verb or action of the sentence. Here, was spun is the verb. That is the action being done in this sentence. The next part we need to look at is the doer of that action. So who or what is performing the action in the sentence? In this case, Rebecca is the doer of the action. The ball was spun by Rebecca. So let's look at a comparison between active and passive voice. How do we know the difference? In active voice, the doer of the action is the subject of the sentence, or who or what the sentence is about. Often the subject comes at the beginning of a sentence before the verb or action that's being done. That isn't always the case, but it often happens in active voice. That's one of the things you can look for if you're looking to see if your sentence is active or passive. Does the subject start the sentence and come before the verb? Let's look at an example. The lady threw the ball. Well, here the doer of the action is the lady. That's also the subject of the sentence, who or what the sentence is about, the lady, and threw is our action, or our verb. What about passive voice? In passive voice, the subject is the recipient of the action. It's the person, place, or thing to which the action is being done. Like in our ball example, the ball that was spun, the ball is receiving the action is happening to the ball. The doer of the action may be indicated with the words by or with or left out entirely. And remember, in passive voice, the doer of the action is not the subject. So let's look at a couple examples. The ball was thrown by the lady. Okay, here again, the ball is the subject of our sentence, but it's not doing the action. Who or what is the doer? The lady. And we see the word by is indicating the doer of the action. It's sort of a signal for us to know who the doer of the action is. And of course, our verb was thrown is the action. In example 2, the doer is left out. The ball was thrown. We don't know who or what is doing the throwing, just that the ball was thrown by somebody, but we don't have by or with to indicate the doer of the action. This can lead to lots of ambiguity in our sentences. Why should we avoid passive voice? Passive voice can fail to create powerful real-time connections between readers and the characters or author's experiences. We say author there because this is true for memoir as well. Most fiction writing techniques will also make a memoir or a story used in nonfiction stronger. Passive voice can also be worded awkwardly, causing the need to reread passages and calling attention to the writing instead of the story. Passive voice can also lead to ambiguity in the writing, as we saw in the example before where the doer of the action is not indicated. And it can cause reader confusion, and that's the last thing we want, because remember, if you confuse readers, you lose readers. Is passive voice ever okay, though? Well, in fiction, passive voice may be used in dialogue if it fits the character's voice, speech pattern, or intentions in a particular situation. As with many writing guidelines, best practices, or even rules, everything can go out the window in dialogue if it really fits the character. In nonfiction is where we see passive voice used most often. In journalism, reporters use it to avoid making accusations or when some facts remain unknown. So you can think of an example like a reporter may be saying, a store was robbed last night. Well, that is in passive voice. The store didn't do the robbing. It's who or what the action was done to, right? So the robbing happened to the store. The store didn't do the robbing. So that is passive voice, but maybe the reporter, nobody knows yet who robbed the store. So that's what passive voice is used there. Also, public figures. So politicians, lawyers, police officers, and other officials often use passive voice when giving speeches or delivering statements. So a politician's not going to want to seem like he's placing blame on someone or making an accusation. Also, a police officer, mayor, or some other official may be making a statement about a crime that was committed, and they will use passive voice because an investigation is still ongoing and they haven't discovered all the facts yet. Before we dive into how to recognize passive voice, are you finding this helpful? If so, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you won't miss future writer coaching sessions. All right, how to recognize passive voice. Look for these buzzwords. To be verbs plus an action verb. So to be verbs are verbs like is, am, are, was, were, be, being, been. Those are all forms of the verb to be. So if you find one of those plus an active verb, you might have passive voice. Let's look at an example. The ball was thrown. The state of being verb or to be verb there is was. And thrown is a past participle tense of the verb throw. So the to be verb plus the active verb was thrown. A sentence may also include a form of the verb have. So have, has, or had, plus been, plus the active verb. For example, the ball has been thrown. So like if they're saying the ball has been thrown sometime in the past, it's not happening now. So you see a form of the verb to have, has, plus been, plus thrown, the form of to throw, which is our active verb there. Another thing to watch for is by or with, plus the doer of the action. The ball was thrown by the lady. When writing, these are not the only things we need to be aware of. Caution, let's pay attention to the following. so we don't slip into passive voice. When writing first person point of view using pronouns like I, me, my, sometimes we can end up with too many of those pronouns, but when you're trying to reduce the use of I, me, and my, don't slip into passive voice instead. Also, in dialogue, yes, passive voice may fit the character's intentions or speech patterns, but use it sparingly. It's sort of like with dialect. If you use it too often, it calls attention to the writing and takes the reader out of the story. How can we eliminate passive voice? Make sure each sentence focuses on the person, place, or thing doing the action rather than on the recipient of the action. So make the doer of the action the subject of the sentence. But what if a character doesn't know who or what is doing the action? Let's look at an example of that. I was suddenly pushed from behind, hard. I was thrown off balance and nearly knocked off the ledge. In this example, there's no way our character can know who or what is doing the pushing because it's happening from behind. So then how can we turn this into active voice when we don't know who or what is doing the pushing? We don't want the reader to know who or what is doing the action here because it would kill the mystery of the scene. Well, here's an example of active voice. We can use what we call indefinite pronouns to show the doer of the action performing that action without specifying who or what is doing it. The indefinite pronoun here is something. Something slammed into my back, hard. I stumbled, flailing for balance. My right foot dangled over the ledge for several stuttering heartbeats. Then I regained my footing. Well, for lots of reasons, this is much more powerful than the other one. It makes the reader feel like this is happening to him or her, and we feel all the fear and the loss of balance, the precarious nature that the character is in. But let's dissect this a little bit. Who or what is the doer of the action here? Something. Something is doing the action. And here we, instead of using pushed, we use slammed. Something slammed into my back hard. Because it could be hands, it could be the person's full body, that's, the person who's causing this, it could be their full body. We don't know what it is, but slammed is much stronger, much more powerful. When we think about powerful verbs, we should consider not only that they are active verbs, but also that they need to be descriptive. So slammed is much more descriptive than pushed. That's one of the things that lends power to the sentence. And of course, we're using the indefinite pronoun something as the doer of the action. And then the other sentence here in the example, I was thrown off balance and nearly knocked off the ledge, that is also passive voice. I, the character, is not doing the action, but the being thrown off balance is being done to the character. So we've made the next sentence active voice as well. I stumbled, flailing for balance. Okay, so yes, the character was thrown off balance, but now we've put that squarely in the head of the character. I stumbled. So the stumbling, the character is doing that. Stumbling is an involuntary action, but this sentence shows that the subject of the sentence, I, is the person doing the stumbling and flailing for balance. My right foot dangled over the ledge for several stuttering heartbeats. Well, the stuttering heartbeats contributes to the sense of fear that the character is feeling and helps the reader experience that as well. We expand this a bit in the second half of the sentence. Then I regained my footing. That shows that the character was nearly knocked off the ledge, but not quite. But it does so in a much more powerful way. I know passive voice and other storytelling rules or guidelines during the self-editing process can seem really daunting, especially if you just want to get the story done already and get it out there to the readers. But that's why I created the passive voice cheat sheet. You've got this. Use the red flags listed on your cheat sheet to help you identify passive voice in your story, then answer the questions provided to figure out how to correct it. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to download your passive voice cheat sheet. Remember, just visit the link in the description or go to b2writercoaching.com/passive to get your copy. Now, for this week's Power Up. Think of an instance in your story in which the viewpoint character doesn't know who or what caused or performed a particular action. Use active voice instead of passive voice to describe that action happening in the story. You can use your passive voice cheat sheet as a guide to help you construct the sentences that you need. Passive voice isn't the only thing that can make a writer feel stuck. By popular demand, next week, we will talk about how to keep writing when life gets in the way. So be sure to hit the subscribe button and click that notification bell so you won't miss it. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about writing craft or life as a writer, or would like to request that we cover something specific in a future video. And in case you missed last week's coaching session, check out this video on how to create a unique character voice. Also, if you'd like to know the secret behind writing a story readers can't put down, check out that video. Until next time, go power up your storytelling.